and welcome back to my channel. Yeah, of course, obviously, it's been a minute, but I just wanted to pop on here and say sometimes you plan things and they don't exactly go as planned. Like drawtober. Yeah, I failed completely to do drawtober, and I'm not even going to come up with a reason why. I mean, I had made sketches, I had planned to film me completing them throughout the month. And the next thing I know, it was Halloween, and now we're going towards the end of November. And it's all right. It's fine. Just the truth is, I'm still trying to figure out how to make content across different platforms. I'm still trying to figure out how to stream. I'm still trying to figure out how to just manage my time in general, not only by trying to create content that I think is fun for me to create and fun for you guys to watch, but also kind of lining up with mom duties and a bunch of other things that are kind of on my plate, including a new job. So, rather than make excuses, I figured I would come on here and show you guys what I was able to complete for quote unquote Drawtober. And yeah, it had been a while since I played around with markers. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so me being late aside, I had a lot of fun working on these. The idea behind them was to create four different costume designs based on prompt words that you would typically find during Halloween. So, like a skeleton, a pumpkin, and in this case, a bat. So, if the wing cape didn't give it away, I'm pretty sure that the giant bat on the bus does. But I had this idea of doing a red to black gradient because I thought it would look really great with pink hair. And so I got to work. I did the sketch in Clip Studio Paint. And as you can see here, I was going for a very Morticia meets Rapunzel kind of vibe. Once I got my sketch to where I needed it to, I went straight away to my markers and started looking for the colors I was going to use. Before I start working on a traditional piece, I always plan out my colors. It just helps me stay on track and helps me know what colors are going to blend well with others. Um, like I said, I wasn't able to get the full piece done on recording, but for the most part, skin is where I usually start when I color traditionally, because I can always go from light to dark. I can't go from dark to light. There is no control Z on a traditional piece. And I knew going into this that blending was going to be the most important part of this piece. Now, I typically work with alcohol-based markers. As you can see here, I'm a big Ohuhu fan. So if you haven't tried Ohuhu, I highly recommend them. I think they are a great Copic alternative, and their color, hashtag not sponsored, but their colors have been really expanding, and they've just been growing as a brand, which has been really great to see since I've been using them since 2019. Now, since I have a tendency to work from light to dark in my traditional pieces with alcohol based markers, um, I typically don't worry too much about the lighter colors bleeding into the other parts of the drawing because I know eventually I'm going to come back with a darker color to kind of go over it and hide those tiny mistakes. So, this is why I'm doing the hair first because the pink bleeding into the dress isn't going to be too much of a problem once I start putting down the dark reds and the black that are going to ultimately kind of fade into this gradient from the top to the bottom of the dress. So what I'm doing now is just kind of blending in those different colored pinks to give that hair a little bit of that gradient effect. I wanted the ends to have a little bit of red and bleeding up into that pale pastel just to kind of give it a little bit more visual interest and kind of go with the theme of the whole point of it being a gradient at this point. So yeah, I had a lot of fun, but my fingers did hurt after working with all this hair. I'm kind of glad I went with using the brush in Clip Studio Paint because having to ink this hair like this would have just made it impossible for me to kind of work in the ink the way I needed it to create this almost seamless gradient in the hair. And I say almost seamless because there are still some parts in the gradient of the hair specifically where I wasn't 100% satisfied with the blending. I wasn't sure if it was because I picked colors that were just kind of too off tone from each other, but eventually I got it to a place where I thought it looked okay, and I started going in, working from, of course, that light red down into the darker red. Now, this part, if I thought the hair was hard, this was a little bit harder. On my test swatches, the reds seemed to blend in a lot more seamlessly. However, once I started working it into the dress, I did have to go back more than a few times to kind of blend that darker red into that top red to create that gradient that I really wanted. To kind of make it look like an airbrush effect and not so much like, or I guess not to show those really hard lines. This paper was just not wanting to absorb the ink the way that I initially hoped it would. So I really had to finesse and work through layer after layer of ink in order to get it to blend the way that I wanted it to blend. And it was especially difficult because in order for it to get that seamless blend, I couldn't let the ink dry too much so that the wetter ink could activate the ink that was already placed. And of course, it could bleed into each other and blend out a little bit more. Eventually, I got it to a place where I really liked it and decided to let the ink settle and decided to move on to other parts of the drawing, like the gloves and the wings, so that I could just sort of focus on something else and give my fingers a break because at this point, they were starting to really hurt from working in all that small, fine motion. So when I started on the wings, I decided to change up my tactic and go from the darkest color to the lightest color in the gradient to see if that would help the effect that I wanted to come out a lot more smoothly. Now, in these smaller sections of the drawing, I think it came out a little bit better. If I had done this the same way I did from the dress, going from dark to the lighter color, I think I still would have ran into some of the patching problems, only because it was a bigger surface to cover, and I did have to go in smaller motions, and I think because of that, the ink was just drying too fast before I could blend it. After adding a little bit more layers of ink to just try to blend out those final parts, I decided to pull out my liners and line the drawing up a little bit more. Now, I had printed this from inking it digitally, but I feel like adding liner over it really made things pop out, and then just added a little bit of hatching to give it a little bit more depth. Now, sadly, I didn't get to film the whole process of me coloring in every single part of this drawing, but I am able to show off the finished product. Long story short, I had a ton of fun and was able to do some gradients on the stained glass effect. It had been a while since I had touched my markers, so it was really great to be able to get back into doing something traditional. And I actually really liked this whole inking digitally and coloring it in like a coloring page. It was really relaxing, oddly. So I think I'm going to be doing a lot more of that in the future, just to kind of touch my bases and not get rusty on my digital art, and also not get rusty on my traditional side, and use my markers a lot more since I have so many of them. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks again for sticking around. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!